everyone to AM Today. I am Sunday Kola of course. I'm not alone on the program. Folashade Ogene is here. It's good to see you again, Shadi.
It's good to be on set with you again. It's quite a while.
Of course.
All right, it's nice to be here this lovely Monday morning on AM Today, and it promises to be a jolly ride with us.
Okay, let's see how jolly the ride is on the pages of the newspapers this morning. We start with the Daily Independent newspaper. Let's check stories making headlines there. On the front page, you have these: end game for FX speculators as Naira begins recovery. Cherry news, you would say, the few days coming would really justify this cherry news. Whether or not the Naira is recovering or is just is recuperating. But of course, it's important and very cheering that Naira is recovering, and we hope that the recovery is going to be a full and complete one, so that things will get better for the citizenry. Now, on page 7 of the Daily Independent newspaper, Serap sues Tinubu over missing $15 billion, 200 billion naira oil revenues. You see, Serap has been suing and suing and suing, and we just hope that the rule of law will take its course and we see result of all of this suing, because these litigations, to a large extent, also have their own roles to play in ensuring accountability in democratic governance. But what has become of all of the
The
litigations all
suits,
along?
yes, because it's a common thing. Serap sues for this and that, and sometimes they even get justice, in the favor of their suit. But then nothing happens. Implementation, nothing happens. Nobody is called to book. So why continue suing when there won't be?
Of course, the court remains the hope, the ultimate hope of the common man. So we always hear. But let's see how it plays out in the coming days, as far as this particular situation is concerned. Let's stay still with page 7 of the Daily Independent newspaper. Brutalization of Ajaero, most barbaric action against a labor leader. That's coming from NASU. You have that story on page 7 of the Daily Independent newspaper. And on page 7 still, FCT natives threaten to sue FG over violation of federal character in appointments. All right, that's on page 7. I think Wike will be responding to that one way or the other. Let's pedal back a bit to page 6 of the Daily Independent newspaper. On page 6, 22 persons feared dead in bandits' rivalry clashes in Benue. Sad, do you say? Check details of the story on page 6 of the Daily Independent newspaper of this morning. Tinubu set to woo investors at Saudi Africa summit. That's also reported on page 6 of the Daily Independent newspaper. Of course, wooing investors, telling investors what they stand to gain by investing in Nigeria. A good way to go, but then Nigerians await the results of all of these foreign trips, the results of all of this engagement of investors, until it translates into, all of these trips, until they translate into tangible investments in the Nigerian sphere. That's when we would say, of course, kudos
And
to the
also
president.
sustenance of the investors too, because some
Very
investors are leaving the country. Now we're going to woo others. Why not let's address the factor that makes them leave the country in the first place, so that what we'll have, it won't be 2 steps forward and 3 steps backward.
Sad. Let's still check some more stories from the Daily Independent newspaper of this morning. Why Nigeria can't be aviation hub for West Africa. That's coming from experts, and there's a writer to it. The bemoan country's loss of billions of dollars to Ghana. Of course, when people have to first go to Ghana before boarding to some other countries, so many things, so many billions of dollars, of course, get lost thereabout. NDDC Senate vows to ensure IOCs pay contributions. That's on page 6 of the Daily Independent newspaper of this morning. Of course, these are many more you find in the Daily Independent newspaper of this morning. Let's check another tabloid.
All right, to the Daily Sun. On the Daily Sun this morning, we have this Labour adamant on strike over a gyro. NEC meets tomorrow to take decision. Flays Imo government urges presidency to intervene. Is LP member, says Onoche. Oh well, details of that you find on page 6 of the Daily Sun.
You see where the problem is.
The accusation.
There's an accusation of
Him being partisan.
brutality against someone, and the only defense you're able to bring up is the fact that he's a Labour Party member. I do not see that as adding up to sense. What is important is knowing how, where, when, and who brought about the brutality. I think it's not an animal kingdom. It's not a banana republic where anything could just happen. No matter what it is, two wrongs will never make a right. There's been lots of argument in certain quarters that there was a subsisting court order against such a protest. But that being as it may, whatever happened to lawfully arresting the situation, even if it had gone, say, we're arresting you or bringing you in for questioning for disobeying a subsisting court order, that would have been a different ballgame. But now the table is shifting, the table is turning because you have introduced illegality in addressing illegality, quote unquote. But then, now that the debate or the back and forth about what happened are now going on, and someone is coming to say he's a Labour Party member, it's for God's sake, I'm not sure what happened there is a question of partisan politics, but that of labor movement, whether rightly or wrongly done, it's a different kettle of fish. But the brutality is something that must not be allowed to just go unchecked. But now coming up with the defense that he's a Labour Party member, does that justify why he should be brutalized?
The defense is actually a weak one.
What?
Being a member of NLC, and if truly
not a member of NLC, the president
of NLC, so to speak. I'm just saying generally as members of labor union or even civil servants, you're not expected to be partisan, right, in politics. And there is a way of dealing with that, if actually it is. So why resort to battering and look at, you need to see, you saw the pictures, right, and see how brutalized it was. If it were some disciplinary action taken against him according to the labor laws or the civil service codes, I don't think anybody will fault them on that. Well, still on the Daily Sun this morning, we see this, not going back on enactment of whistleblower law declares federal government as CSOs set to hold policy round table on projection or protection law, that's for whistleblower. You find the details of that on page 7 of the Daily Sun for this morning. And also this one, NEITI report, Tinubu sued over failure to probe missing $15 billion and 200 billion naira oil revenue. Details of us on page 27 of this missing money. And yes, we are borrowing. It seems we are borrowing to actually embezzle or to I don't know. How do I put it?
You see, transparency in governance can never be pushed aside. And any government, any administration that handles with levity issue of transparency and accountability would not just be heading for the rugs, but would also be doing itself a whole lot wrong. Now, what is more important is the fact that when you find allegations of misappropriation, allegations of lack of transparency and accountability in financial governance, of course, what it turns out to mean is eroding the confidence of the people in such government. And I dare say that the Tinubu administration would not be if it continues to look away from such accusation and allegation. And so there must be a way to either respond to the allegation or address the content of the allegation so that Nigerian people will not lose confidence, if there is still any at all, in government of their land.
Okay.
It's very important.
Okay, in the midst of all this missing money, Nigerians groan over rising cost of cooking gas and others. Detail of that is on page 20 of the Daily Sun.
So then the question is, what exactly will be affordable?
What is affordable? Actually,
Petrol is
it's
beyond
not
the means of the common man already.
yes.
Then you also find food items, the cost soaring day in, day out. What you will use to cook it is also going into oblivion, as it were, because once the common man cannot also afford that there comes a problem. Now, we're at a time when we're talking about climate change and all of those other issues. Whether you like it or not, people will have to resort to is a firewood now. Now, just this morning I was having a conversation with some colleagues, and then one was saying, "Look, even the firewood is even nowhere to be found.
It's nowhere to be found actually because the deforestation is
Setting
wide.
and it's really getting
Yes.
everything into a comatose." So I do not know where and how government want to do it, but there must just be something done. There are fears in many quarters that look now you find petrol, maybe it's artificial or not, but those who are supposed to tell us are also keeping mum. You find queues resurging at petrol stations, and all of these things also contribute to economic hardship and all these financial woes. It's sad,
It's
I must
sad,
say.
yes.
It's not the best of times, but then we also remain hopeful that, well, something will be done. Otherwise, once hope is dashed, I do not know how well it will be renewed.
Well, something this morning, I'm so glad that now you are getting hopeful. You're becoming hopeful. Before you say, oh, I don't like when you people say hopeful, but now you're getting
I've
hopeful.
never been pessimistic.
Let's-
What I have always said is that while you are raising your hope, do not be too optimistic, but also don't be pessimistic. And how do I say that is this? When people get too optimistic and too hopeful, they tend to live extravagant life. They tend to go overboard. Of course, we've been promised renewed hope, and then they will now go overboard and say things will get better. Then extravagant spending will set in, and then they will start going into all of this,
All right.
and they would not remember that once you don't save for the raining day, rain will beat you blue black once it rains.
Mammoth Crowder's Jury hence a Yenagua campaigns. Oh, so that should be a paid one. NDLA seizes 14.4 million pills of opioids in Lagos raids as trafficker excretes 86 wraps of heroin. That's on page four. I wonder how they swallow these things. That would be all
What's
injustice.
even funny there is the three blind men that were also arrested um,
With drugs.
with drugs, and you see the visually impaired people. There are very many of them that are very good people, of course. But then it beats my imagination how those three men, visually impaired, still went into such
They could just be
How do
gullible,
I-
you know, and
Gullible,
somebody,
you
yeah,
say?
yes, and somebody played on probably their lack or, you know, disability to trick them into such a business.
Well, the interesting part of it is the fact that it seems NDLA is not going to take no for an answer. Week in, week out, you find NDLA fighting tooth and nail to get drug traffickers and barons on their knees. But until the Nigerian people key fully into the fight against substance abuse and trafficking, the war against such might not really be that effective. So then, I also think the mantra of if you see something, say something is gaining traction, provided that the confidentiality of those who see and say would not be compromised eventually. Kudos to NDLEA, and I feel that there must be more to be done to gain the trust of the people, to collaborate with critical stakeholders in ensuring that the fight against substance abuse is a total one.
Right, Rex appointments. LP threatens legal action. Akwa Ibom, APC disowns new INEC rec. That is coming from Umure You find details of that on page 26 of the Daily Sun. And finally, on the Daily Sun this morning, we have this: NAF strikes terrorist hideouts in northeast, northwest. Okay, find details of that on page 4 of the Daily Sun.
All right, let me also go daily. The Daily Trust newspaper. I know you avoided that paper because of the many things on there. On the front page, you find devaluation pushes Nigeria's debt to 89.2 trillion naira. That's terrible. You find these writers to the story as debt stocks raised by 20.6 trillion naira in 5 months. What government should do? That's coming from experts. I hope that the experts' advice would be heeded, and then let's see how that goes. Now, this is the interesting part of it. As a Nigerian, I think you should listen very well. Each Nigerian owing 418,779 naira. So, Shade, you are owing
When did I borrow that?
418,779 naira.
When did I?
Dear viewer, you are owing 418,779 naira. That's the translation of it. After you listen, we would also have to pay.
Yes, it's definitely owing 400 and some trillion naira. Man,
Abiodun Motosho is also owing
he's owing that
779 naira.
You know.
As funny as this could sound, it paints a gloomy picture of how terrible the debt profile of Nigerian state is. And what's to be done is to look at how we could defray these debts. Otherwise, we'll continue to owe our legitimacy and sovereignty directly or indirectly to those borrowing us, as the scripture says that
the borrower is
slave to the lender. And so it's sad, funny, but sad. By December,
But
I'm sure that
actually,
the money will have increased from
if you look
418.
at it, let's take a closer look at it. 18,000.700. You understand? 700.
No, that's 779 naira.
No, 779 naira. Do Nigeria expend that much on each citizen? You know, to warrant owing to that tune? Does the government spend to that tune on each citizen?
Well, Ajuri Ngilale should be able to answer your question, but it's also important that one way or the other, there must be a way to defray this debt. Otherwise, it's going to be a terrible thing eventually. Now let's move on and check the paper. CBN Governor Cardoso vows to fight inflation. Okay.
Better do.
It will be interesting. At least that will also go certain steps in addressing the issue we just talked about. To focus on core mandate of price stability. Inflation has had massive impact on lives of Nigerians. And don't see, well, that cannot be overstressed. The truth is, it has really affected every sphere of life. So something must be done. Forex gains, banks' profits balloon by 156% to 2.3 trillion naira. Okay. Abuja hotels tighten security amid U.S. embassy alert. Of course, yesterday, U.S. government did raise alarm to its citizens not to be wary of hotels, major hotels in the nation's capital. That need to really get something done about that. Security agencies must also not sleep on the alert. There must be actions taken immediately on it. Alleged buyers, IGP to redeploy CP. That's you find that on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper of this morning. Okay. Mr. and Mrs., let's check this cartoon. You're too stingy. I must be crazy when I agree to marry you. And then the man asks, are you okay now? Okay.
As funny as it sounds, but that seems to be the situation right now in most homes because people be like, money is not forthcoming, and then the man of the house might not be able to dole out money as expected or as usual. So,
You see, in relationships, friendships,
yeah, it's not
relationships,
about money.
marriage, and all of that, there must be a balance of need um, and then taking a look at what are your needs and what are your wants. And this is not a time to satisfy your wants. These are times to now. This is a time to now focus on your needs and play down on your wants. Um, if you've been getting this Shwebi of 25,000 naira before,
Okay, sure.
I think you should have a rethink. If you've been frivolous in spending and then you've been extravagant, I think it's time to have a rethink. We're not saying you shouldn't live a good life, but it's important to now prioritize and invest more in things that would be bingers of brighter future for you other than all of this super fleet of naughtiness. What is more, it's a time to also develop mutual understanding between couple because um, if the husband is not really giving out what he should, the wife has every right to think he's stingy, but try and understand the signs of the time. Perhaps he's not stingy, perhaps he's just not having it good. Let's encourage one another. Let's also see to it that we're not being preyers on one another. Otherwise, you see, mental health is important at a time like this. Do well to help your neighbor. Do well to help your partner. It's very, very important.
All right, away from the Vanguard newspaper, let's check what's on Nigerian Tribune for this morning. Kogi Imo Bayelsa elections. IGP orders redeployment of Imo CP. Begins distribution of new vehicles and security personnel. You check details of that on page 22 of the Nigerian Tribune for this morning. And also on the Nigerian Tribune is the story as well. CBN remains focused on price stability. That's coming from the CBN governor, Cardoso. Why Naira regained strength at FX market. APCON, is giving explanation to that. You want to know what the explanation is? Get a copy of the Nigerian Tribune and check the front page. Sanwo-Olu commissions red line Onyibo overpass. Okay, that's for Lagosians. Check page 2 of the Nigerian Tribune for that. FG reopens Ibadan Airport. You find details of that on page 3 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. NAF airstrikes hit terrorist hideouts in northeast, northwest. Details of that is on page 26 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. And also on the Nigerian Tribune on page 2, FG to raise VAT revenue from 35 trillion naira in 2023 to 45 trillion by 2026. Check page 2 for detail of that story. Then that will be all from the Nigerian Tribune this morning.
All right, then let's move on to yet another tabloid this morning. It's the turn of the New Telegraph newspaper. On the front page of the New Telegraph newspaper this morning, you find stories making headlines there. The latest story there: Senate moves to shield REC appointees from impending court injunction to transmit 2.17 trillion naira supplementary budget to Tinubu. That's what you find on page 2 of the New Telegraph newspaper of this morning. And still staying with the New Telegraph newspaper on page 14 of the paper, lawyers are saying one-time final adjudication of election petition won't serve justice. Want petitioners' right of appeal sustained. That's on page 14 of the New Telegraph newspaper of this morning. Off-season poll. Police to deploy 220 operational vehicles. Others. Okay. Well, beyond this deployment, there must also be professionalism and the way and manner the officers on duty will conduct themselves in Imo, Kogi, and Bayelsa states in this election. Very, very important. Now, this one on page 4, NAV is saying we killed scores of terrorists in northeast, northwest airstrikes. Interesting. On page 4 of the New Telegraph newspaper. But immorally, Agiro's brutalization violates trade union rights. That's coming from NASU. Demands probe, removal of Imo CP. Find details there. FG to construct irrigation farming dams in Benue. That's coming from Minister. You find that also in the Telegraph newspaper, specifically on page 25 of the paper. This and many more this morning you find in the New Telegraph newspaper.
All right, and leaving the New Telegraph, let's check what is punchy on the Punch newspaper for this morning. 220, pardon me, 220 police patrol vehicles deployed in Imo, Kogi, Bayelsa. IG to complete deployment Friday to redeploy Imo CP before polls. Egbetokun bars VIP escorts, orders personnel to curb vote buying and violence. Okay, check details of this on page 2 of the Punch newspaper for this morning. Niger, Benue, Kano marketers hike fuel, blame transport cost. All right, so check the detail on page 22, not just these states that I mentioned, whatever in our city here, the state here in our Korea here, you get marketers tell you that the reason for the price increase in commodities is because of fuel, the hike in fuel price. All right, cooking gas scarcity hits Lagos, Casina, and others. Find details of that is on page 31 of the Punch newspaper this morning. Collecting pension or lawful, Falana tells Akpabio and others. We hope they listen and they yield, or certain steps are taken so as to prevent, continuous collection of multiple pensions by this people concerned. Details of that you find on page 48 or 45, I beg your pardon, of the Punch newspaper for this morning. Commanders, others killed as military bombards terrorists. That's you find on page 45 of the Punch newspaper. On page 8, details of 70 recovered corpses with police. That's in Abia. So sad. You find details of that on page 8 of the Punch newspaper this morning. Lautech student sues Makinde for relocating a Greek faculty. What he got there. You find details of that on page 7 of the Punch newspaper. And Israel gives condition for ceasefire. Deaths eat 11,000. My God. Details of that is on page 7 of the Punch newspaper this morning.
Let's check the sporting arena this morning. Our Sporting Sun is our guide. On the front page of the Sporting Sun, you find this story. Olaino scores first Forest goal. It says, my goal was one to remember. I'm happy to get off the mark and help the team. You find that on page 6 of the Sporting Sun newspaper of this morning. Check results also there, splashed on the front page of the paper. Pastor Adeboye unveils Redeemed Club, Dove FC. Of course, that's on page 6. Gift Monday bags praise to Sink Ajibade's Atletico Madrid. That's on page 6. Get details of this and many more from the Sporting Sun newspaper this morning. Well, we close shop on that segment, and then when we return, to be time for topical issues discussion this morning. Please do stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back.